beautiful, isn't it? These are public lands, your lands, part of 270 million acres cared for you by the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. This agency, part of the Department of Interior, was formed 50 years ago when Congress merged the Grazing Service and the General Land Office. This year, as the BLM celebrates its 50th anniversary, the agency rededicates itself to managing your public lands. Lands managed for many uses, managed to improve the health of the land, for your use and your children's use for many years to come. To achieve that goal takes dedicated people, working with volunteers and the many users of public lands, ranchers and hunters, miners and fishermen, timber and oil companies, environmental groups, state and local agencies, all working together to protect your public land and the habitat it provides for wildlife and for you. But let's let some of these dedicated and hardworking people tell you about it themselves.
Here in Northern California, BLM managed lands touch the Pacific at the King Range. As in many public lands throughout the West, Americans come to camp, to hike, to picnic, and to watch the seagulls as the fog rolls over the nearby hills. In the California desert country, people come to enjoy the scenic beauty of the desert, the flowers, the cactus, the beautiful sunrise. Throughout the country, recreational use of public lands is growing every year, and BLM wants every visitor's stay to be an experience they truly appreciate. Whether enjoying an active physical adventure like biking, climbing, hiking, whitewater rafting, four-wheeling, or quietly watching the lazy clouds on the horizon.
The Pacific Northwest has some of the most fertile forest lands in the United States. For decades, these public forest lands have contributed to meeting our nation's needs for wood and for fiber. Wood to build homes, and bridges, and crates, and even toys. Fiber for paper we use every day in business, in schools, and in our homes. Not only are these forests among the most valuable and productive in the nation, they also provide essential habitat for a wide variety of plants and animal species, such as the Pacific yew, salmon, and the northern spotted owl. It is BLM's responsibility to take care of these public forest lands throughout the West and Alaska, that animals have a place to live, that streams remain clear and productive, and that people have a place to see and enjoy nature, and that trees continue growing for years to come.
Caring for the forests and wildlife habitat is a big part of BLM's job. The same is true for rangelands, river and stream areas, high deserts, and other types of land managed by the BLM. They all have the same basic components of soil, vegetation, and water, but they have distinctive features too. All of these parts add up to what we call ecosystems.
Here in Idaho is a good example of how BLM cares for public land. The South Fork of the Snake River has a dazzling array of natural resources. It's one of the best cutthroat trout fisheries in the world, and it's one of Idaho's recreational hotspots, especially when the insect hatch hits in midsummer and the fishing is excellent. BLM tries to manage the South Fork as a unified whole, looking at the entire watershed. Before we make a decision, we'll study how our actions could influence other parts of the ecosystem. We look less at boundaries on a map and individual uses, and more at interrelationships among natural resources and people. And that's not just happening on the South Fork. Ecosystem management is the way BLM manages all resources. Ecosystems can be small, such as a creek or a spring in the desert, or they can be large, an entire river basin such as the South Fork or a sprawling desert. It's a new way of looking at resource management, and we think a better way of caring for your public land.
This is the Blackfoot River in western Montana. where the BLM is using partnerships with local people and other agencies to improve the health of the entire 1.5 million acre watershed. By looking at the big picture, we're able to work toward common goals that benefit the river, which is the lifeblood of the valley. Ranchers and farmers, timber growers and sawmills, state and federal agencies, and recreation and fishing organizations are all working hand in hand with BLM to improve the valley. BLM is working to improve wetlands, riparian areas, and water conditions throughout your public lands. Water that is so necessary for cities and towns, for agriculture and industry. Streams and rivers for recreation and wildlife and fishing. BLM is learning that working together through partnerships is a giant step toward healthier lands.
One of the best examples of successful partnerships is here at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho, the nation's logistical support center for wildland fire. Here, BLM and 6 other federal agencies work together to enhance our nation's ability to manage wildland fire. This partnership enables agencies to share supplies, equipment, technology, and personnel to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of our wildland fire management program. The programs at the Fire Center support land managers as they make and carry out resource and fire management decisions. During fire emergencies, when local and regional resources are exhausted, NIFC mobilizes those forces closest to the incident, regardless of agency affiliation. BLM's National Law Enforcement Program is charged with protecting public lands and resources from abuse that results from unauthorized use or illegal activity. A big part of a BLM ranger's job is to educate public land users so that visitors and employees are safe and the resources are protected.
Over 25% of the public lands are here in Alaska. Across the country, on 270 million acres of public lands, BLM has a special responsibility to co-manage and protect America's fish and wildlife habitat. The agency works with natural resource professionals from federal and state agencies and native and private organizations to manage a variety of those habitats. Alaska habitats include boreal spruce forests, the Arctic tundra, and the transition lands between, and 135,000 miles of free-flowing rivers and streams. There are vast herds of caribou and moose, and even a living fossil from the Pleistocene era, the muskox. Many migratory birds and waterfowl breed and raise their young in a land of the midnight sun. On the rivers, grizzly bears and eagles compete with sport and commercial fishermen for their elusive prey, the 5 species of Alaska salmon. Nationwide, millions of people hunting on BLM-managed lands add billions of dollars to local economies. We at BLM take our responsibilities seriously. Our goal is to manage public lands carefully so fish and wildlife will continue to thrive, not just for those who hunt and fish today, but for future generations.
Public lands are home to America's living legends. Thousands of wild horses still roam the vast open range and are the responsibility of the BLM. Left unmanaged, wild horse and burro populations grow beyond what the land can support. Some of the animals are gathered, given veterinary care, accustomed to domestic feed, and offered for adoption to qualified, caring people throughout the nation. Horses and burros share the land with privately owned cattle and sheep grazing on public lands. The BLM works with resource advisory councils made up of local people. Their advice, coupled with scientific principles, guide the management of rangelands to guard against overgrazing. We manage these lands so they will support livestock, wildlife, wild horses and burros now and in the future. Here in Nevada, BLM manages 48 million acres. Nationally, the BLM manages minerals under 32% of the U.S. Imagine, that's more than 732 million acres.
Here in Wyoming, those minerals, resources that lie under the surface, are important. This is the coal and oil and gas that America depends on to heat and light her homes and power her industry. Over 1/3 of our nation's coal is on BLM minerals managed land. over 60,000 oil, gas, and geothermal leases that supply the energy we depend upon for transportation, heat, and light. Gold, silver, copper, and other metals, gypsum, sodium, phosphate, potassium, and many more minerals, and sand and gravel, and the list goes on. Resources mined and extracted under BLM's administrative responsibility. Yes, when you turn on a switch with copper contacts mounted on your gypsum drywall and you get light or heat, it may well be that BLM, working with industry, made those materials which you own available for use. And when the mining is over, BLM's job is not. The agency cares that the land is restored to a healthy condition, ready for many other uses.
BLM's care extends below the surface of the land, not only for subsurface minerals, but for the many caves found under public lands, where scientists, cavers, and explorers appreciate this beautiful treasure, where scientists may discover new and valuable resources. BLM's commitment to safeguard public lands extends not only to protecting areas where valuable scientific resources may be found, but also to protecting the habitat and endangered species of microorganisms, plants, birds, and animals. As citizens of the United States, as the nation's largest landowner, we must be sure that our children will benefit from good stewardship, and that the people entrusted with that job, the Bureau of Land Management, cares for and takes care of your public lands.
Public lands that stretch from sea level at the Kings Range to Colorado's mighty Rockies. These are the highest points of BLM land, over 14,000 feet in Colorado's San Juan Mountains, where many Americans come to enjoy the beauty of your public lands, the wildflowers and the tumbling streams. It's great to find a peaceful spot, to rest, to camp, or just to simply smell the flowers. Modern American explorers can visit the old mining town of Animas Forks. They learn of the natives who lived in this area centuries ago when they visit the BLM Anasazi Heritage Center in southwestern Colorado. In Baker, Oregon, at BLM's National Historic Oregon Trail Museum, today's travelers can feel the hardships pioneers felt moving west. And in winter, BLM lands really come alive. Drive one of the 54 byways located in BLM areas and rediscover your public lands, their majesty and their beauty.
More American and international tourists are visiting our public lands every year, and the Bureau of Land Management keeps up with their wishes, like the tremendous increase in mountain bikers that ride on public lands every year. The Slick Rock Bike Trail here in Moab, Utah, is a world-famous destination for some 100,000 mountain bikers annually. Visitors can catch the excitement of whitewater rafting down the mighty Green and Colorado rivers that carve their paths through this region, revealing the deepest layers of time. An equally exhilarating way to explore BLM lands is by high-clearance four-wheel drive vehicles. Thousands of miles of roads and trails throughout the West, created by early miners and ranchers, allow visitors to see the land in all its magnificence. Visitors can cherish the historic cultural sites and resources and marvel at the rock art and cliff dwellings that tell stories that depict the lives of those that traveled this land in history before our time.
America's historic treasures are just that, treasured public resources. Here in Arizona, the scientist, student, researcher, and historian, all who want to learn and experience more of our nation's history, can visit Indian ruins that predate European settlement. They can experience a historic Spanish fort of 1776 and relive the school days of the 1920s in Arizona's remote Mount Trumbull area. Because BLM cares for these historic treasures on your public lands, America can learn and explore. Archaeologists can study and interpret the past for people to enjoy, from historic ghost towns to ancient campsites, from petroglyphs etched into cliff walls to excavations of forgotten places. BLM cares for these historic treasures so they will be here in the future.
Historic records are important, and preserving historic records, especially land records, is a must. In Springfield, Virginia, in BLM's Eastern States Records Room, original government records of land transfers that date back to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson are stored in archive conditions, while the data and reproductions are being stored on laser discs. Facsimiles and data will be quickly accessible by computer. Surveys dating from the birth of the nation are included. And today, the Bureau of Land Management, the official surveyor for the federal government, continues to survey your land. Cadastral survey crews use the latest in global positioning system and satellite technology to conduct surveys to solve federal land managers' problems. Locating habitat, cultural sites, recreation trails, and resource areas. BLM crews continue to survey wilderness areas, national park boundaries, and Indian reservations.
And now the current records of the public lands, such as land status, oil and gas leases, fish and wildlife habitat, cultural resources sites, and much more are being transferred to computers. Information will be quickly and accurately obtained and shared with other agencies, private individuals, industry representatives, state and local governments. Information so necessary to manage lands for oil and gas leases, mining, grazing, recreation, and the many other uses of the public lands. Information to assure a healthy land available for its best use.
You've met only a few BLM folks, a few of the many whose dedication and perseverance continues to improve the health of these lands, public lands that will provide resources for our nation. Timber, forage, minerals, oil and gas, but also wildlife habitat, wilderness, water, and opportunities for millions of recreationists. 50 years of caring for your public lands. We've come a long ways. During that 50 years, the agency is focused on its mission of caring for public lands and developing the art and the science of managing public resources. On this 50th anniversary, you're encouraged to get out and rediscover your public lands. The Bureau of Land Management is dedicated to continuing to manage these public lands for you, to be healthy lands, and to ensure that these resources will be available for your children and their children for generations yet to come.